One take deal. That's it. I'm just going to say this, and if it comes out well, fine. If it comes out terrible, so be it. I'm going to try to keep it about 5 minutes. I'm drinking my coffee, too. But the thing is, and this is probably going to be a rather boring video, so whatever. I don't even know what I'm going to say, except that I do have an idea in my mind about something, and that is about experience through experimentation. That's how we learn anything. I mean, just as a group, as human beings, as a culture, as everything. We learn by experience, by actually going out and trying things, doing things. I've been around people who are so afraid to try anything different or anything new. People get used to things. They get used to a certain routine, a certain way. I actually realized that when I do my paintings, for example, I had to learn a lot of stuff. And I look at these paintings, and I'm still at almost like a kindergarten stage. I'm still at a very early stage of learning. So I'm not by any means any kind of real artist, and I don't think I ever will be, because I don't think I'm going to dedicate that much time and energy or effort to this. I don't see myself becoming anything spectacular. Now, not unless, the only way it could happen if somebody came back and gave me a big giant grant of money that was so much money that I could actually spend nothing but time, doing this. And then, yeah, then I'd be a different story. That I could do this for a living. And I'd be, I'd have so much money that it wouldn't be any pressure to be really great at it, which makes me better. Anyway, the point that I'm making, and as I said before, even if this video doesn't come off perfect, I'm just going to talk. I got to talk it out, because that's how I actually that's how I like to make my videos, when I'm talking out an ideal. A lot of people, when I get on YouTube, there's so many different things, and I get to thinking about all this battle between the theists and the atheists. And somehow, I haven't got really sucked into it, but I found it fascinating because I always think about God. I consider myself to be a person who believes in God, believes in a God of a sort, if you want to put it that way. And I'm not going to go into defining it and try to explain it, because I actually think, in honest truth, it's really not that important. I think people put far too much time and energy into this debate about whether or not there's a God. It's really like an argument about something that's not important. Now, I know that religious people are losing their mind, and I know that people who don't believe in God are losing their mind, because everybody got to believe that, oh no, this is an important battle. No, it's not. There are a lot of things far more important, like, what kind of brush techniques he's using or whatever. What kind of rocks are these or whatever. How did I come up with the idea? This is far more important to me than the question of whether or not there's a God. It's not something I give a lot of time and energy to, but you can't help it. Almost every other page has something to do with God in the debate. One time when this coach from UCLA, the one who died not too long ago, John Wooten, was talking about something, and he mentioned something about religion, and he was just talking about how, his religious faith and how he did that, and just sort of integrate that to the thing about talking about basketball. But he wasn't by any means focusing on religion. But oh my goodness, in the comment section, there's some people getting this big debate about God and this, that, and it's like people can get so caught up in these battles that all of life is passing them by. To me, I want to live. I want to enjoy life. And one thing that you learn is by actually going out and experimenting and testing and doing. There is a bigger question that I'm getting into. Again, this video may meander all over the place, so I don't really care. But it's about this whole notion of, where people think there's only one way to think about something. There's only one way to be in life, one way. And I feel that we're getting into this thing about the religion thing, that's where I have a problem. I have a problem with people who call themselves rationalists because they think that that's the only way you can look at the world, through absolute rationality. And I also have a problem with people who look at things religiously, because everything has to be looked at in terms of God and what God wants and what God doesn't want, and where is God and who is God and why is God, and all that sort of thing. And I get to thinking, you know what? Life is a lot of varieties of things. There are many times when I'm very scientific, so to speak, and I have to be very precise and do measurements, because, I have to use this insulin pump. I have to take insulin. So I got to measure out stuff, and things have to be measured and precise and exact and whatever. And I have to check my blood sugar, and I have to measure and be as precise as possible with how many carbs I'm eating, and so on and so forth. There's lots and lots and lots of precision in science and that sort of thing. But that doesn't dominate all my life. There's some degree of precision when it comes to painting, making sure the lines are just right and this line doesn't cross that one when I'm painting these rocks. But there's a kind of freedom too. There's a kind of any way I want to. I made the background nice and simple, white. But I have other ones like this one. I made it kind of a different spectacular thing. You can't see that tree there. There's like a little tree there. I made these colors, and it was an experiment with colors based on something somebody else did. But it kind of is actually an experiment gone wrong, except it doesn't look like that. It looks nice. Here's another thing I'm experimenting with, different things. I'm trying different things. But yet there is a precision in painting. Yes, there's a knowing how the colors blend and things like that. And that comes from experience. You can listen to other people and they can tell you things. And right now I'm still in the process of working on this one. You know. But life is that. It's the same thing with trying to understand the world. No two people are going to see the world and reality and everything exactly the same. So if we're going to debate, it seems like most of these debates, when you get into it, the religious debates, they're always like, see the world this way. And somebody else said, no, don't see it that way because it's going to lead to this, that, and the other thing. See it that way because it's going to lead to, you know what? The one thing is that we should all come to the one conclusion that maybe Socrates came to, and that is to understand that the greatest wisdom that you can have is to know that you know nothing. Which really is a contradiction in terms. I mean, if you know nothing, the one thing you do know is that you know nothing, which means that that's not really true. But it's there to make a point. That statement isn't so much to express an absolute truth, but to wake your mind up to something. To the fact that there's so much for you to learn. There's so many things in this world that we don't know. There's so many things that we don't understand. Our understanding of the world is limited. Our knowledge of the world is limited. And a lot of times people don't think about that. They don't know how to live with that ideal. People want to know everything. I want to know everything. Why? Because you want to be able to predict everything. Because you want to get the upper hand in life. If you could know what lottery number is going to come out, you could play it. But you'd also know what would happen as a result of winning the lottery. And you know other things, but you know, that's not knowledge. That's imagination. You imagine what would happen if you won the lottery. You imagine what it would be like if you could do something. You imagine. And I always think about what Einstein said, that imagination is more important than knowledge. And it is. You know, I imagine many different things about what I'm going to do with a rock. And I try something. And sometimes things work and sometimes things don't work. You know, when I did this, I was actually trying to create a certain effect. This tree, for example, shouldn't be sitting on that. Well, actually, it is sitting in the right place in that purple line, so to speak. But it was supposed to stand out more. You can barely see it unless you look at it up close. People would see that, and I think they would. A lot of people love the colorfulness of my rocks, some of the colorful ones. But that's just the way it is in life. Sometimes things work and sometimes it don't. And sometimes, even when things don't work, it's still a lot of fun. You know, there are times when mistakes happen. And it could actually be, it could turn out to be a wonderful mistake. You know, there are times when people have invented things by accident. They've created things by accident. They left something out a little bit longer than they should have, but it turned out perfect. It turned out to be something that becomes a thing that they can market and make $1 zillion off of. Life is randomness. And I actually accept the random nature of life, but I also think that there's order. There is a kind of paradox to things. There is a randomness and an order. What there is things happen in our lives in more or less random ways, but we find ways of organizing it, of creating meaning to it, of making it work a certain way. We make things work. We find a way to organize reality in our minds. But the organized aspect of reality is in our minds. And when things don't fit, we tend to ignore it. It sort of ceases to exist. Maybe not physically, but it ceases to exist psychologically. That's why I think that when people look at things from a religious argument point of view one way or the other, they tend to ignore a lot of things. Like rationalists tend to ignore this very spiritual side to them, a very spiritual-like nature. I'm going to say spiritual-like, not necessarily spiritual. But you tend to ignore that and even become hostile toward it. And people who are very religious, and even to the extreme point, become hostile toward their more rational side. You develop a kind of seeing that as the enemy. But in fact, a real person, a person who is more holistic in their thinking, understands that they have both these parts. And they're both complementary and they both help us. That these sides aren't in conflict. There is no real conflict, really, if you look at it the right way. And that is to understand that all of this is a part of you. There's no real conflict. It's kind of an interesting thing because this is something that Einstein said. There really is no conflict between religion and science. He said that the reason why people think that is because they're in error in their thinking. People look at it the wrong way, basically, and think that there is a conflict, when in fact there really isn't. It's something to think about. It's just a thought on my mind about these things.